for Chuck to tell Jimmy that he never really cared that much about Jimmy, Jimmy can't fathom that. Chuck has meant everything to him, and it's a particularly mean and cutting comment. It really does feel like a last straw. Ultimately, it's the most hurtful thing he could hear, and it'll reverberate in his heart that way.
Hey guys, Kiwi here. In this video, I'll be discussing the most recent conversation between Chuck and Jimmy McGill from the Season 3 finale of Better Call Saul. With that being said, a warning of spoilers for everything in the show up to episode 310, and let's jump right into this. So during Chuck's final conversation with Jimmy, he tells Jimmy that he never really meant that much to him. The entire scene is set with Jimmy walking into Chuck's home with it completely back to normal. Lights on, music playing, and food in the fridge. Everything was re-established to the way that it once was. Jimmy is very surprised that Chuck has recovered the way he has, and that's exactly what Chuck wants him to think. And so throughout the entire conversation as they catch up, Chuck seems very stuck up about the fact that he's recovered and moved on. Chuck makes it seem so obvious that he was always going to recover, when in reality, he's just putting on a show for Jimmy in the same way that he did for Howard last episode. And when you think about it, this is the same thing that he did when he ended up originally pushing away Rebecca. I just can't get over the way that Chuck seemed so genuinely calm and truthful about those words, and that's because Chuck is just so good at putting on a fake face in order to manipulate people into believing what he wants them to, especially Jimmy. So as Chuck decides to manipulate him one last time, he hurts his feelings in the worst way that he knew how.
Chuck's a smart guy, and he wants to hurt Jimmy, and he knows the most hurtful thing he could say is that. Jimmy has in the past said to Chuck, "Can we just be brothers? I'm willing to let everything go that's happened, and let's try to start anew and care about each other."
It's not so much that Chuck didn't really care, it's just that he made Jimmy believe that. Chuck said that he didn't want to hurt Jimmy's feelings, but that's exactly what he wanted to do. And with that being said, it's just incredibly messed up to make his own brother believe something like that just because he knows it would be so hurtful since Jimmy cares so much about him and his approval. Chuck genuinely hurt Jimmy as much as he possibly could with his final words to his brother, and now Jimmy will be believing lies about himself for the rest of his life due to the negative influence from Chuck. So once again, Chuck did care about Jimmy, but in a negative way. As Chuck's actor says on Talking Saul, if Chuck never cared about Jimmy, it wouldn't matter to him whether Jimmy was a lawyer or not. If Chuck never cared about Jimmy, all of Jimmy's success wouldn't have bothered Chuck whatsoever.
But what do you think he means in that moment? Is he sincere when he says you never mattered to me?
Well, clearly, if you judge by his actions, it's not true. He's cared very much. He's cared very much in a very negative sense. If he didn't care, it wouldn't matter to him that Jimmy McGill was also practicing law in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I think what he's really saying is, go away, I never want to see you again. That's clearly not the same as not caring.
Right.
That's caring very much the negative.
Chuck's condition really worsened after his final conversation with Jimmy, implying that his condition is definitely based around his relationships with the important people around him along with how they view him. Chuck's condition first started showing signs after his separation with Rebecca due to depression over losing her, but it also stuck around during the entire time Jimmy was supporting him because Chuck has had a lifelong hatred against Jimmy. Jimmy constantly trying to prove himself to Chuck also didn't help, considering that Chuck hated seeing Jimmy succeed, especially when he took shortcuts. But the thing is, if Chuck would have just supported Jimmy in the first place, Jimmy probably wouldn't have ever done any of those shortcuts to begin with. Anyways, what Chuck calls Jimmy out for next during their conversation is pretty ironic because he's blaming Jimmy for something that he's actually doing himself. Although Chuck tells Jimmy that all Jimmy does is tear down everyone around him, that's literally what Chuck is doing. Now if you've watched my previous videos on Better Call Saul, then you know all too well about how Chuck's torn down every important relationship around him. Chuck is not only tearing down all of his friendships, by the end of the episode he literally ends up tearing down all of the walls around him as well. And what takes this even one step further is that while Chuck is destroying everything in his life, including his home, Jimmy has been running around trying to prove that he can fix things. Since Chuck told him that all he does is destroy everything around him, that really hit him hard considering what he did with Irene. And so what Jimmy does next is he throws himself under the bus in order to get Irene her friends back. Jimmy purposely outs himself over the microphone so Irene's friends would hate him and not her, causing them to take Irene back as their friend. And he actually proved Chuck wrong here, making it that much worse that Chuck never gave Jimmy a chance to change. It's very disheartening to think of the tragic conclusion to the McGill brothers, but that's a part of what makes this such a good drama TV show. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below, and also feel free to leave any video suggestions as well. I'd appreciate a like on the video if you've enjoyed anything I've said today, or even subscribe for more Better Call Saul content in the near future. As always, I thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
If you're not going to change your behavior, and you won't,
I can
why not
change.
just skip the whole exercise? In the end, you're going to hurt everyone around you. You can't help it. So stop apologizing and accept it. Embrace it. Frankly, I'd have more respect for you if you did.